Bill Malcolm. I work at the University of Melbourne teaching agricultural economics to agricultural science students. I'm a professor of agricultural economics, and my background is I grew up mallee farming. I've been involved in farming all my lifetime and involved in economics for most of it as well. My field is farm management economics, and I've always been on about managing farms well to make profit and to manage risk. And now the carbon story's come along. It's just a new, farming's always changing. This is another element of it that we're going to have to deal with, because as I've said many times, we can run but we can't hide from it, and we're going to have to manage the carbon story as part of our whole farm system. And it's important that we just get it in the right perspective and manage it well. I don't actually use the term carbon farming in the sense that it's just another part of farming. Like building soil organic matter has been known since 40 BC, right? So the ancient Greeks and Romans wrote about soil carbon, and so it's just good farming to build up soil organic matter. But it's more than that, obviously, and sequestering carbon with trees and things like that. But I prefer to just use the term farming and farm management, and within all the things I'm doing on the farm, one of them has carbon implications. One is the emissions, which is economists call a pollution, and I'm responsible for that. The other is reducing those emissions by doing things to sequester carbon or reduce the emissions from livestock. So it's just another part of the farm in my mind. It's a change in our whole environment, our whole economy, our whole farm system that we can't ignore. It's not going to go away, and it's there, and we've got to manage it. We can't ignore it. But like all change, like farmers, change is not new to farming. Farming is all about change, and the best farmers manage change to their advantage and minimise the disadvantage. And so I actually see this as a new phenomenon we're going to have to deal with. As I've done many times, I now talk about a profit, a balance sheet and a carbon sheet, and because I've got to know what the extent of the emissions from my farm system are, because I'm going to have to do something about it. I'm either going to have to pay for the cost I'm causing, or I'm going to have to reduce it by changing my farm system and increase my profits. So farmers are going to have to be aware. I'm still learning about it, but we're going to have to learn more and more about it, simply so we can manage it well. The answers to any question about farm management is it depends, and it's case by case. There's no general answers, but case by case, depending on what my goals are as a farmer and whether I've got succession plans, what I'm wanting to do with my farm and my farm system. Of course there's advantages because, as I say, we can't avoid it, so to manage it well is the advantage. And if I can manage it well and keep increasing my farm profit, then it's a plus. But if I minimise the cost to me in one part of the farm and increase the profits in another part, if there's a net gain, there's an advantage to me. Yeah, using to your best competitive advantage, and that's what farmers are so good at. Like all the time their world is changing, their opportunities are changing, the activity gross margins are changing, it's raining or it's not, we have droughts, we have markets collapsing. Farmers are so good at coping with change, and this is another change which they will cope with really well. But they're going to have to be smart, and farmers are smart. They're going to have to be on top of it, they're going to have to understand it, because you can't manage it well unless you understand it. And there's a saying, you can't manage what you don't measure. And there's a lot of talk about measuring carbon, but I say you can't manage it unless you measure it and understand it, where it fits into your farm system, and the best thing for your particular farm, whether it's to reduce your emissions by doing things on your farm or to go flat out farming. Don't worry about the emissions from your farm, because you're going to reduce your obligation to society, pay your cost by maybe getting someone else to do the sequestering for you. No, but that's the way it'll go. It should go. Yeah. As my story about the Northern Territory, I only thought of that today, but I thought, Jesus, big difference in profit. I'll pay you not to run cattle, and I'll run the bloody things, you know. To me, as an economist, that is the solution. But me little farmer in Indonesia, they're that bloody corrupt. Yeah. It'd never work. Yeah. But so I'm a bit theoretical. But in theory, there'd be a global carbon price, and I'd pay some poor bastard somewhere. He's better at putting carbon away. I'm better at farming, and away we go. That's the theory, you know. But the practicalities kill a lot of that. Well, now all state governments and federal government are now committed to dealing with it, because the rest of the world is, and if we're going to be sell things to the rest of the world, we've got to be doing as much as we can And that's the bottom line. And farmers face that too. If they want to sell into international markets, we export most of 60% of everything we produce. If we don't do the right thing, we won't get into those markets. So it's not a choice, and governments have recognised that. But also governments have recognised that the farmer is not the big, they're not the big main game. It's the big polluters that are the ones that should be tackled first, and they are with the various schemes we've got at the moment. And they're the ones that the focus should be on where the big pollution is coming from. But farming is part of that, not a big part, but still we're in the game. And I think governments have now got wider popular support for doing stuff about carbon than they've had for a decade. And we did have a carbon price 2013, and the carbon emissions fell in Australia in those years. So in that sense, we know the theory about putting a price on things works. And state governments seem to be doing a lot. I'm impressed with what I see coming out of the State Department of Agriculture, like the technical information which I as an economist need and farmers need, good technical information, because as you know in the modern world there's a lot of what I call misinformation or poorly informed information or economic illiteracy out there. So good technical information, I think the best source is good scientists. They're either working for governments or for universities. That's the first credible source, and then some simple good economics applied to that, and away we go. So I think governments are doing a better job every day on this. When I'm thinking about carbon farming, I'm just thinking about my whole farm first. So I think about my whole farm, I think about my goals. What am I trying to do? I'm trying to build wealth to create choices. I might be trying to build wealth to be able to do succession. So it's the whole farm system. And then I think about where does this new opportunity or this new cost, either way, where does it fit in my system, and how do I fit it into my system so that I meet the profit and productivity imperative that's there anyway. Like, I have to continually increase my productivity and my profitability to stay in business in Australian farming, and farmers are very good at it. They farm for generations because they continually improve their productivity. This is a new part of the story. It's a new cost, it's a new burden, and a new opportunity. And I've got to fit it into my whole farm system. Don't lose sight of the main game, which is whatever my goals are, but for many it's to build wealth, to create choices, to maybe set up the next generation. That's the main game. Do it the best way I can within this new environment, which has an added cost and added opportunity. There's never enough public awareness. The widespread ignorance of agriculture, I find in urban areas, is profound. Okay, agriculture might only be 2% of the GDP, it's 10 or 15% of exports. Farmers manage most of Australia's land. Despite that, the ignorance, as I've said, of agriculture is profound. So the answer to that question is there is very limited understanding of agriculture with or without thinking about the whole carbon and climate, global warming story. Well, if we're going to have sensible policies about anything, if we're going to manage things well, you can't manage what you don't understand or even are aware of. And if we're going to have to push politically difficult decisions, we've got to bring the public with us. People have to be informed. And good politicians used to be able to do that. I don't see it so much nowadays, but you have to sell a reason and a story for doing hard things. And we, as I've said many times, we can run but we can't hide from climate change. It's not going to go away. We've got to deal with it. It'll require political will and well-informed policy. And the only way to get that, and popular support. And you've got to put those three things together, build the platform, sell the policies, implement them, make them work. If you don't do that, the world's wide open for the frauds and fakesters and White Shoe Brigade and every other con merchant around, where good science doesn't matter, good economics doesn't matter, and we don't solve the problem. Critical thinking is the best source of unbiased advice, like the ability to think critically, and no one's got a monopoly of truth. But like, as a trained economist and trained scientist, I always say I go to the people who I think know best, and they're the ones who are well trained. So I go to scientists. I go to the Victorian Department of Ag. They've got terrific scientists. Universities around the country got great scientists. Ag research centres, fantastic scientists. Australia's got fantastic scientists scattered everywhere. And the ones I've worked with scientists all my life, they're so willing to share their knowledge and to be asked about their pet bit of knowledge. So, but it's the thing I will warn people about, is to beware of the sort of evangelicals who've got the answer. No one part of an answer is the answer. There's many bits to an answer. So we need to get the science right, the economics right, and the sociology right, and the politics right. And so just be aware of the guru types. It almost become a cult sometimes. You get leaders with the answer and they're selling it. And I'll finish with this, where to go for good information. I've said, wherever there's good science, good economics, good research, that's your answer. It's not Dr. Google. It's good papers, published papers in respected journals. That's authentic science. It's the best approximation of truth. But just beware of the brigade who have the answer and develop a following, and they're often making a living out of it. But they're frauds, basically, I would say. Now, just to wrap up, I'm learning about this whole new carbon story because it's not going to go away and we have to understand it. My approach is do what you're best at, and that will be best then for the economy and for the society. We all have to pay our way. We have to pay for the costs we cause, which is contributing to global warming. I remind farmers that they don't wear the cost themselves. It's passed around the economy. People tend to think a tax where it's laid is where it's paid. It's not. It's laid on consumers, it's laid on farmers, it's shared. Consumers will end up paying most of the carbon tax, as they should, because that's why we're doing things. So that's the one bit that only trained economists sort of understand. Costs are shared around the economy, so it's not as big a burden on farmers as they might think. And regardless, my final word is the best thing we can do is what we're best at, and if we're really good at farming, well then go for it, and then we're well equipped then to deal with the added cost that is inevitable.